Welcome to the You Empowered podcast with your host, Justine Jetty. If you want to unlock your potential and step into the most authentic, healthiest, and happiest version of you, then you're in the right place. Each week, we'll dive into practical, evidence-based strategies for your habits, mindset, and health so you can create a life and a body you love. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to the You Empowered podcast. I'm your host, Justine Jetty, and today we're going to be busting a lot of the most common myths around building muscle for women, why building muscle should be one of your health goals, and what you can start to do from today that'll make that a reality. And if you're enjoying this podcast and getting value from it, the best way you can support its growth so I can keep bringing you these episodes is to rate and review the show. It only takes less than a minute, but it makes a huge difference for the podcast and for the women that need to hear this. So I wanted to start today's episode by busting the two biggest myths that I've heard around building muscle for women, or at least the two biggest myths that I've heard in the coaching space in the last 12 months. So the first myth is that lifting makes women bulky, and I can't believe this myth is still circulating, so I hope that today's episode is going to bust this myth for you once and for all. Women have 10 to 15 times less testosterone than men do, making large muscle gains naturally very slow. Building muscle doesn't happen at the same rate as losing fat, which is another common myth. So for example, it's realistic for you to think that you can lose anywhere between 2 to 5 kilos of fat in a month. But for women, lifting twice per week and getting enough protein and enough rest and recovery are lucky to gain even 200 grams of muscle mass in a month. So even under the perfect conditions, and the perfect conditions being progressive overload, sufficient protein in your diet, and enough rest and recovery, women may gain around 200 grams to 500 grams of muscle per month, and that's only in their first year. So there is a difference between a beginner lifter who's got around 12 months of experience or less of lifting, and between an intermediate lifter who has around 12 months to 2 years, and an advanced lifter who's got 2 years plus of lifting. So in that time, as you advance between beginner, intermediate, and advanced, the muscle gains that you can get decrease significantly. So realistically, for a beginner with less than 12 months of lifting experience, you have the potential to gain roughly 2 to 3 kilos of muscle in a year. But as you shift to intermediate and advanced, that slows to around 1 kilo a year. So in reality, what women perceive as bulky physiques in women usually require years of training, being in a consistent calorie surplus, and often performance-enhancing drugs. I've been lifting weights heavy in the gym for over 15 years now, and I'm still waiting to look and feel bulky. So instead, what weightlifting has given me is more confidence in my body, a more toned physique. But beyond aesthetics, I feel more capable in my everyday life doing things. It has made me stronger and fitter, and it's just made me feel more empowering. I can't quite explain it, but there is something so empowering about lifting something heavy that just gives you a confidence boost. So my takeaway for you with this myth is lifting weights will not make you bulky. They will actually shape and tone your body, not turn you into a bodybuilder. And I just want to point out that building muscle mass, so going back to those numbers of building 1 to 3 kilos of muscle mass in a year, is not the same as seeing visible toning. So what we call the quote unquote toned look is the result of losing fat and building muscle. And so seeing that visible toning look can take as little as 8 to 12 weeks of consistency with the right nutrition, training, and sleep. So I just wanted to point that out before we move on to the second myth. The second myth that I really want to bust, and I've heard this so much in the social media space in the last 12 months, is the myth that after perimenopause, there's no point trying to build muscle because it's so much harder. And the reason why I think this myth still exists is because we know that hormonal changes in peri and postmenopause with lowering of estrogen, progesterone, and the growth hormone can absolutely affect muscle protein synthesis and recovery. If you're a woman in perimenopause, you might also be noticing that you don't recover as quickly or gain strength as fast as you did in your 20s or even your early 30s. And so you might be wrongly assuming that building muscle is no longer worth the effort. And then, of course, we've got social conditioning and outdated fitness advice that is reinforcing to you that the idea of doing cardio or focusing on light toning is what you should be doing or should be focusing on after 40, which is simply not true and not the case. So the evidence-based truth here around muscle growth in perimenopause and beyond is that muscle growth is still very possible at any age. So studies consistently show that women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s and beyond can build muscle with resistance training. Now, the rate might be slightly slower, but gains absolutely still occur with the right stimulus. So the right stimulus is volume, intensity, recovery, and nutrition. So volume means that you might benefit from slightly higher weekly sets per muscle group. For example, 8 to 12 reps instead of 6 to 8 initially to trigger growth. Intensity being that we want to train closer to that muscle fatigue or failure because the hormonal assist is lower. In terms of nutrition, we want to ensure that you are having a high protein diet and intake, roughly 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight daily. And recovery, we want to ensure that you are getting an adequate amount of sleep. You're ideally having a day in between your training sessions so that your body has the space and the time to adapt, which happens after your recovery as well. And the benefits are even more important for you now. Women lose between 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade after 30 years of age without doing resistance training. And that accelerates after menopause. Making strength training a part of your week now is going to protect you with your bone density, your risk of falling and fracturing, and supporting your metabolic health. These benefits cardio cannot do for you. And I want to point out that maintaining and gaining muscle now has been linked to better quality of life, mobility, and independence as we age as women. So yes, it might take more intentionality and smarter training when you're in perimenopause and beyond, but you can absolutely build muscle in this phase of your life. I've had clients in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who've never lifted before gain visible definition, strength, and confidence in under a year. So it is not impossible. It's that you need the right strategy and the right expectations. So most women already know the standard benefits of building muscle, that it improves your metabolism so you can burn more calories at rest, and that can support long-term healthier body composition for you, that it can strengthen your bones and your joints, that it can improve your sleep quality and helps with healthy aging. Stronger muscles lead to better endurance like running, cycling, and hiking. It can reduce fatigue with your daily activities. And of course, probably the most popular benefit is it gives you that toned look that every woman seems to want. But beyond aesthetics, I want to share with you the lesser known benefits that women rarely hear about when it comes to building muscle. So something you probably didn't know is that building muscle actually helps your mental health and your stress resilience. So resistance training reduces symptoms like depression and anxiety. It improves your self-image and your body satisfaction independent of physical change. It can also support PMS symptoms and reduce them. So studies actually show that strength training may lower menstrual cycle pain, improve your mood, and reduce water retention in some women. It also has linked benefits to gut health. So exercise-induced muscle contractions improve gut motility and reduce constipation risk. There is also an increased pain tolerance that muscle building helps with. So regular strength training can raise your pain threshold, making discomfort in daily life less impactful. Building muscle can also support your immune system to reduce illness recovery time. It can create stronger posterior chain muscles that improve your posture and body mechanics. It can support you during pregnancy and postpartum. So strength training has been linked to a healthier pregnancy, to supporting your body through birth and birth recovery. And the last but certainly not least lesser known benefit is the cognitive benefits of building strength and muscle. So strength training can improve your cognitive function and memory. There was a long-term study in Australia that found that older adults who did strength training outperformed their peers in memory, attention, and reasoning. And those gains held even after 12 months later and were strongest in the people who built the most strength, interestingly. Resistance training has been linked to improve mood and lower anxiety, as I mentioned before, which supports your overall mental well-being. But what I found most interesting about how resistance-based training supports our brains is that it supports our neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to rewire itself and therefore protect the brain against things like dementia and cognitive decline as we age. So those are the underrated benefits of strength and resistance training. And you might be thinking, well, that all sounds great, Justine, but where do I start? So I would start by following a structured training program. I can't highlight this enough. The amount of women that I speak to on a daily basis who are just going into the gym and just doing whatever they feel like, whether it's a class or just doing whatever exercise they feel like doing, it is the equivalent of throwing something at a wall and hoping it sticks. So please, I highly recommend following a structured training program first and foremost, so you have that key factor of progressive overload, which I mentioned before is a key element for building muscle. The second thing I recommend is to simply start with 2 full body sessions a week. So research shows that training each muscle group at least twice a week yields way more benefits to muscle growth compared to once a week. And the last question that I want to answer for you today is, do I have to do weight training? Now, if your goal is to build muscle, yes, you do. I know there are other forms of resistance-based training like Pilates, bodyweight training, resistance bands, all of that stuff. And these all count. I'm not disregarding these. These all count, but they are not equal. For example, going to Pilates twice a week is not going to give your body the same benefits and same muscle building benefits as doing 2 weight sessions in the gym once a week. I'm sorry to bust your bubble there. I know there's a lot of promotion around Pilates being incredible for building muscle. It's just not the same as weight training. Weight training is absolutely king when it comes to both building muscle and strength. And the reason for this is that progressive overload is easier to measure and apply. So with weights, you can precisely track how much you load, how much you're lifting, and gradually increase to keep challenging your muscles and have that progressive overload. The second reason is what I'm calling greater maximum load capacity. So free weights or machines allow you to lift heavier safely, especially for larger muscle groups like squats, deadlifts, and presses. To put it simply, body weight training and doing things like Pilates can only challenge your body so far. So heavier loads recruit more muscle fibers, stimulating greater hypertrophy. That is why, again, weight training will always be king for building muscle and building strength. The third reason why weight training is king is it allows you to incorporate full range of motion under load. So weight training lets you train muscles through their complete range with resistance in both concentric and eccentric phases. So concentric is the lifting phase, eccentric is the lowering phase, which research shows is optimal for muscle growth. And the fourth and final reason why weight training is king is it's easier to target specific muscles. You can isolate and strengthen specific areas more effectively than many bodyweight or Pilates movements. So you don't have to start with heavy barbells, but if your goal is to build and keep muscle as you age, weight training is the most effective and time-efficient method. Other forms of resistance training, like I mentioned before with Pilates and bands, are great additions for variety and joint health, but they won't match the muscle building potential of lifting progressively heavier loads. So the key is whatever you do, it needs to challenge your muscles enough and progress over time. I hope you got a lot out of today's episode. Don't forget to rate and review and share it with a friend. Until next time, take care.